Okay, so the Image GPT API just came out, and basically this is the new image generation feature that ChatGPT came out with a couple of weeks ago that replaced DALL-E. But now, as I already mentioned, it's available via API. And in short, this just means that we can use it inside n8n to automate anything image related. So in this video, we're gonna be looking at how to use the GPT Image API inside an agent, as well as adding this image generation feature on top of other agents or workflows we already created in the past, just like this agent that can analyze a bunch of ads and give you valuable insights. So in this case, once it gets all of that juicy information from the ads, then it'll have enough context to actually create an image ad based on all of those ads that it has seen. And we'll also check this other product photography workflow. So in this case, we would have a list of product images, and using the image generation tool, then it'll create professional grade product photography out of those photos. And last but not least, we're going to be rechecking this news curator workflow that essentially gets all of the best AI news from the past 24 hours. But now in this case, apart from getting the whole news text and the news URL, we'll now actually create an aesthetic image for it to post on socials or a website. So yeah, without further ado, I'm just gonna demo this first general agent that can create images or edit images using the new GPT Image API. And I'm just telling it to create a comic style meme and to choose whatever it's about. So now I'm just gonna send this. And after a couple of seconds, it just replied, and apparently this meme is about a cat. So if we actually download this image, I know we can see it right here, but let's just download it. And you can see that this meme has successfully been created, so that's working. And that was the image creation from scratch, but now let's actually edit an existing image. So in this case, I'm just gonna click on this paperclip right here and send an image I have downloaded. And since this is a game character, I'm just gonna tell it to make it ultra realistic. So let's click on send and see what it comes up with. Okay, it just replied, and let's download this image. And it looks like it successfully worked, so now we have a Steve in a ultra-realistic human version. So yes, this general image creation agent is working, and I know that you can do all of this inside the ChatGPT paid plan, but this is just to showcase what's possible with this, and you can use this to create better or more complex solutions, just like the ones that we're going to be looking at in a few seconds. So let's move on to this next demo, which is an AI agent that can analyze ads. But like we mentioned, in this case, it'll also be able to create the actual image creatives. Now, I'm not going to be talking in full detail about this agent and the tools that it's connected to, because I already created a video on it a couple of days ago, so you can check that out right here in the top. In this video, we'll focus more on the Image GPT API and the possibilities of how it can be used. So yeah, now let's actually just chat with this agent. And in this case, I'm not gonna directly upload the image of a shampoo and tell it to create an ad, because for this, it first has to analyze a bunch of other ads so that it can have some context on how to create it. So here, I'm just telling it to give me insights on ads about shampoo, because that's the example we're gonna be using right here. But after a couple of minutes, it just replied, and as you can see, all of the ad analysis, ad copy analysis, creative analysis, and so on is right here. So now with all of these insights, context, and knowledge that it has, let's actually upload the shampoo bottle that I have prepared right here. And I'm just gonna tell it to create an image ad creative for that bottle, and of course to take into consideration all of the insights that it has gathered. So let's see what it comes up with, and I'm gonna click on send. And after a couple of seconds, it just replied and it gave me some additional information. But let's just download the ad creative, and boom, here is the ad image that it has just created. And if we check out its prompt, which is right here, you can see that it gets most of its inputs from the actual analysis that it did right here. For example, here it mentions that most include a lifestyle imagery, like the product being featured in a kitchen or a bathroom, and the color schemes, which are mostly bright and appealing colors. So all of that just got translated into this ad creative right here. And for the actual text in the image, it got it from the ad copy analysis. So here you can see that it says common messaging. Many ads emphasize multifunctionality. So that's why it probably says all in one. And you can see that for the common call to actions, we have get yours today And that's exactly what it put right here. So yeah, this accurate ad image creation feature is working perfectly, and it's a great addition for this ads analysis agent. But anyways, now moving on to the next example of product photography. Here I have a direct workflow that gets images from a Google Sheet and then actually creates the professional grade product photography for it and then uploads it back to that same Google Sheet. And we have all of this right here. In this case, we're only going to use 3 images for example purposes. And it'll be a perfume bottle, some glasses, and some jewelry. And in this case, I tweaked it so that the products can actually be worn or used by human models. So that's something tricky we'll see if the GPT image API can do. And like always, this workflow is something I've already done before in a past video, but the only difference is that then I use the Google Gemini API to create the images. But if you want to check it out right now, it should be up here somewhere, so click on that. But anyways, back on track, I'm just going to click on test workflow so you can see how this works. And after a couple of minutes, it just finished, so let's check out the Google Sheet. And as you can see here, it has already created all of the prompts, and beside it you can see the actual images. So let's go to this first one. And in this case, it's from the sunglasses product model, and you can see that everything here is extremely realistic, extremely well made. But after that, we also have this bottle right here, and as you can see, again, everything in super professional grade and very, very realistic. And then for this next earrings, let's check out what it actually has. And again, boom, super, super realistic. And it resembles the original product extremely well. So with all of that, you can see that this workflow is functioning correctly. And now let's actually move on to this next one, which is a research tool. In this case, it's tailored to searching the best AI news from the past 24 hours. And it just curates all of this information in a fancy newsletter and sends to your email. So if you want to check this out and how to build it, then again, you can check in the top of the video right here. But regarding the image generation feature, it's right here. In this case, this would be very, very valuable for anyone that has been creating automations to research and post on social media, because I'm pretty sure that nobody really liked the past generic AI images because they were boring and they didn't really add value to the whole post. But now we actually have this new image feature like we mentioned, so this can be a great addition for anyone that's doing something similar. But let's actually test this workflow out, and in this case I'm not gonna run the whole thing. Instead, I just pinned this final list, so in this case we just have a couple of news articles, and I just connected it to this node that creates the actual prompts for the image generation, and of course the image generation right here. So let's just test workflow, and after a couple of minutes it finished all of these 3 images. So let's check it out, and for example, for a news that was about a ChatGPT tutorial for beginners, this is what it came up with. So very minimalistic, just like I mentioned it in the prompt. Then this next one, again, just some simple icons and a clean text and a clean title. And then we have this one, which is a news about a new AI tool that can basically do all of the shopping for you and can search you the best deals. And of course, way better than the old generic AI designs. And as an extra, just to verify that all of these images were created correctly and appropriately, here let's check the actual news list that we have. So the 3 news are right here. And for this first one, you can see that here it's mostly talking about a new ChatGPT feature where you can shop for things and it'll be like your personal shopping assistant. But anyways, you can see that this news is related to this image right here, which is correct. And then for this next news, we have steal these 5 Cursor for X AI startup ideas. So I think this one is related to this one right here. So that's correct as well. And for this last news article, we can see that it's about a ChatGPT tutorial for beginners, which is related to this one right here. So again, everything is correlated and working perfectly. So yeah, that would be all of this for these demos and how powerful this tool can be used on its own and also paired with more powerful or complex agents or workflows. So with all of this said, let's actually get our hands dirty and look at all of these examples in detail so you get to know how to create them and use them. But before that, I also want to mention our new Skool community. Here you'll have access to all of the templates of the agents and workflows that I build. So you just go to the template you want, scroll down, click on blueprints, select the blueprints and click on download. And then in n8n you just go to the top right here and click on import from file, select your file, and that's it. And apart from that, we have 2 modules if you're a complete beginner that's starting from literal scratch. And of course, you'll have a more direct access to myself, so you can ask me about any n8n problems that you might be having. So if you're serious about getting into AI and automation with n8n, right now we have an early bird offer for the first couple of members. So if you're interested in all of this, then check it out in the description. But okay, now let's actually get started into seeing how this general AI agent to create and edit images works. So first off, this whole workflow consists on a general agent, as you can see right here. Then we have these steps to make the image manipulation easier. And we have a tool called Edit Create Image, which is connected to this other workflow right here. And here essentially the image and the prompt from the agent arrives. So then we just have to check if we're editing an image. So if the user message has an image, or if the user message doesn't have an image, so we're creating an image from scratch. And okay, with that overview, now let's actually go step by step on how this agent works. So first of all, like you saw in the demo, here my agent chat window has this paperclip icon, and this just means that I can upload any file or image I want. So to enable that feature, you have to go to your when chat message received trigger, and then just enable allow file uploads. So then when the agent has access to the image, we'll upload it to Google Drive. And this is because it's much easier to transport images between nodes or workflows using a simple link like a Google Drive link. But whenever you send the image to the agent, it'll actually be in raw binary format. So that's why we first upload that raw image into Google Drive so that we can work with the simple link. And this is how it goes. So first, the agent receives a chat message from the user. And with this node, we're simply checking if the user message has an image or not. So in this case, it's a simple switch node. And for the first router, we just have this expression right here, which is the expression of the image binary that comes in. And we're simply checking if it exists. So here I just selected the object type and selected exists. So if it does exist, then it'll go to this router right here so we can upload it to Google Drive. And if it doesn't exist, so if there's no image in the user message, then it'll just go to this other router right here and literally do nothing. This node literally does nothing, but it's just here for representation purposes. But anyways, once we have filtered all of this information and uploaded the image, if there's an image to Google Drive, then all of that data will finally reach the AI agent. And here I'm actually just gonna run this with an image so you can see how this whole flow operates. Send it this baby otter picture. And I'm just gonna tell it to add headphones to this baby otter. And as you can see, the message was received. It does contain an image, so now it's uploading it to Google Drive. And now it reached the AI agent. So it's doing all of its processes and it picked this tool to edit or create an image. And after a couple of minutes, it just completed this tool and now it replied. So let's actually download this image to see what it provided. And you can see that it made a perfect edit to add headphones to this baby otter. So yeah, in this case, you can see that it received the message. Then in the switch node, we had this image which was called data 0, which is basically the default name for all of these images. So that's why I put binary.data0 right here. And since it actually does exist, then it goes to this router and uploads it to Google Drive. So here I just set the resource as file and to upload it, and that the data field name to upload will be data0. So here I'm basically just mapping this image right here. Then for the file name, I'm just calling it image, and then I'm uploading it to a Google Drive folder. And this is the folder, and as you can see, the baby otter is right here. So in this case, we're kind of using Google Drive as a middleman to transport the images between nodes and workflows in an easier way. And then after that, when everything reaches the actual AI agent, here in source for prompt, instead of using the typical connected chat trigger node, I'm actually using the find below, because the agent, apart from actually reading the user message like it always does, it'll also read the actual image. And in this case, it will be the image ID. So here, as you can see, whenever we upload the image to the Google Drive folder, it outputs an ID. And this is important, and keep this in mind, because later on, when we actually download the image back into n8n, we'll use this ID to do just that, to download the image. So in short, if you're creating this from scratch, just change this to define below. Then for the user message, you can find it in the chat message trigger, which is right here. So here you can just search for the message, which is chat input, and drag it right here. And in my case, I added this user message tag so the actual user message can be beside it, and the image ID tag so the image ID can be beside it. And also remember to put the image ID as optional, because sometimes the user won't send an image, so this will be empty, and this is just to avoid any confusions when the agent reads this prompt. So yes, that's the user message. And now for the system message, I'm simply telling it that this agent is an assistant designed to edit or create images using an image editing creation API tool, and that the tool is called edit create image, and that for this it'll require an image ID, which sometimes will be available via URL, so in this case it'll have to extract it. And this is just for the case the user sends a Google Drive link instead of just the image ID, but since the image ID is already included inside that Google Drive URL, then it'll just have to extract it like I mentioned it here. So sometimes it'll require an image ID, and apart from that it'll also require the prompt, which will be the instructions on how to edit or create the image. So now that's the whole agent. And then for the chat model, well, in my case, I just picked GPT-4o mini, but you can choose whichever you like. And then for the memory, I'm just using the typical window buffer memory. The only difference is that here, instead of using the normal connected chat trigger node option for the session ID, I'm just using define below, but it's still using the same variable. So if I change it, for example, to this one, then it's just locked into this JSON.sessionID. And this session ID actually comes from this trigger node right here, which is at the start. And for this variable to work, then this node actually has to be right behind the agent's node. And in this case, it's like 3 nodes behind, so that's why this expression doesn't work. So to change that, you can just go to define below and then search for the actual chat trigger, and the session ID is right here, so just map it, and it's literally the same thing. It's just that now we can actually access it. But next, then we actually have the edit create image tool, and this tool is the one that's connected to this other workflow where we actually use the API to create or edit the images. So inside here, I just named it edit create image. Then for the description, I just put in call this tool to edit or create an image using AI, and that the required input should be an image ID and a prompt/instructions. So after that, you actually have to connect this tool to the workflow. So in source, just select database, and then here in the drop down, just select your workflow. In my case, it's called GPT image API tool, like it's right here. And then for the input, which will be the image ID and the prompt, well, here in your case it won't appear unless you have already created your other workflow. So here in this other workflow, in the trigger, we require 2 inputs, an image ID, which will be of type string, so some text, and a prompt, which again will be some string or text. So once you have this node and the required inputs specified, then now it'll automatically pop up right here. So if I just delete this and click on refresh workflow input list and click on this add workflow input to send, then you'll see both of those variables right here. So then you just set up the image ID. So then you would actually have to map this variable. So we can just map the ID that comes in from Google Drive, but you can also just enable this let the model define this parameter. And in this case, it's just better to let the AI extract this data, because sometimes this ID won't come directly from the node, but maybe from a user message. So to make all of this more dynamic, let's just let the AI handle it. But for this, we also have to add a description just so it doesn't get lost. And I'm just gonna call it the ID of the image, so super simple. And then onto the next variable, I'm just gonna select the prompt. And again, I'm gonna let the model define this parameter. So in this case, it'll probably extract it from the user message. And then for the description, I'm simply gonna describe it as the prompt or instructions from the user on how to edit or create an image. So then once you have all of this information specified, then this agent will be practically finished. Now the next thing you have to focus on is creating the actual tool. And here, just for clarity, I'm actually gonna go to executions, and I'm gonna select this last execution we did to create the headphones for the baby otter, so you can see what happened behind the scenes. So first off, it triggered from this other execution workflow, and you can see that the image ID came in as this one and the prompt came in as this one. So here the agent did a great job at defining both of these variables. And after this, we're simply checking if the user message had an image or not. So if it didn't have an image, then we'll create the image from scratch. But if it did have an image, then it pretty much means that the user wanted to edit another image. So we go to this edit image flow. And again, here it's the simple switch node. So here, this image ID variable will always come in. The difference is that sometimes it'll be empty and sometimes it'll have some information. And actually, I'm just gonna copy this whole execution to my editor so you can see better. Okay, so that's ready. Okay, so yes, here for this operator, since it's a string, and if we go to string, we actually have exists and does not exist. But in this case, we won't be using this because, as I mentioned, it'll always exist. It's just that sometimes it'll be empty and sometimes it'll not be empty. So that's where we're using these empty operators. So if it's not empty, it'll go to this flow, and if it's empty, then it'll go to this other flow. And in this case, it wasn't empty, so the image ID and the prompt goes right here. And since right now the image is not inside n8n, it's actually in the Google Drive, then here for the first step, then we have to download that image. So just select file for resource, and then for operation just select download, and download the file by ID and just map in the image ID right here. So once it does that, then now we'll finally have the image inside n8n in its typical raw binary format. And for example, if we click on view, then you can see the original image, which was right here without the headphones. So then once we have that image back inside n8n, then we can finally edit it using the GPT image API. And right now we can't actually just search for OpenAI and select edit or create an image. Because here, for example, if we click on generate an image, then for the model, we only have DALL-E 2 and DALL-E 3. We don't have the GPT image model. So in this case, we just have to use the typical HTTP request to use it. And then to fill all of this information, you actually have to check the documentation. So if we check the create image edit endpoint, we can see that the URL is this one right here. So just copy this and paste it into your n8n, so copy it right here. Then you can see that it's also a post request. So again, just change this method to post. And then if you actually noticed, this HTTP request is a bit different from the other ones. So after that, then we just have to authenticate our OpenAI account. So we just select predefined credential type. Then here in credential type, just search for OpenAI. So you can search it right here and click on OpenAI. And then here, as usual, you can just pick your OpenAI account. And if you haven't done that yet, then you can just create new credential and paste in your API key right here. And okay, now after that, we have selected what action we want to perform. So now let's actually specify what data to send. So just enable send body, and for body content type, instead of the typical JSON, you have to select form data. Then add your first parameter, which will be the actual prompt. So for the type, just select form data, name it prompt, and map in your prompt. In this case, it'll come from the actual trigger, so go to your trigger and you'll see the prompt here, so you can just map it in, or you can also map it from the most recent node, which is this one. But after that, then we actually have to send the image. So add another parameter, and in this case, it'll be an n8n binary file. And then here you can just put in a name and map in your actual binary data. In this case, all of the images will be named data, so just put in data right here. And then once we have the prompt and the image, then we actually have to select what model we'll use. So just add another parameter, select it as form data, name it as model. So in the past it would be DALL-E 2 or DALL-E 3, but now we're using GPT image 1. So yes, to use the GPT image API, we only have these three requirements. But here from the documentation, you can see that you can add other parameters. Like for example, the quality, you can specify if it's a high, medium or low quality. Or for example, the size, maybe you want the image to be a square, maybe you want it to be a landscape format. And for all of that, again, you can just add the parameter and specify everything right there. But anyways, once you have all of this data and click on test the step, you'll get this output right here. So it's true, you don't actually see an image, but the actual image is encoded into this base64 JSON. So this text is actually extremely long, and this is where all of your image information is stored. So to transform this format into a typical binary image, then you have to use this node called convert to file. So here for the operation, just select move base64 string to file, because this is a base64 string, and then actually map in your base64 input field. So in this case, it's already mapped, but you can just drag and drop it right here. So that's the input, and then for the output, you can just select any name you want. In my case, I'm gonna keep it simple and I'm gonna put in data. So then once you run this node, then it'll transform this whole text into the actual image. So boom, that's the otter with the headphones. And then after that, we just upload that image to Google Drive. So here again, resource file, operation upload. Then for the input, you just map in the exact name we had. So it's data, and we mapped in data. Then just select what file name it should have. In my case, I'm keeping it simple as well, so created image. And then just specify to what folder it'll send that image. And once it runs this node, then of course it'll be sent to your folder. So then once that happens and this whole flow is complete, then the agent will actually read the outputs from the last node, which in this case is the upload image. And if you remember well, the agent actually provided the download URL. So it probably used this variable right here, which is the download URL. And that's what it sends back to the agent's workflow. So yes, that was essentially the edit image flow. And then for the create image flow, it's again super similar. The only difference is that now, since we're creating an image from scratch, then we don't need any previous images. So that's why we don't have this download image node. And then for this first step, again, we're using a HTTP request to call the GPT image API. And actually, before we start explaining this, I'm just gonna run the agent again, but now so that it goes to this flow so that we can see all of the variables that get passed within these nodes. So back here in the agent, I'm just gonna ask it to create an image from scratch. And in this case, it'll be a bulldog riding a skateboard. And okay, it just created the image. So now let's go back to our tool. Let's go to executions, and you can see that we have a recent execution right here. So let's just click here, and you can see that now the flow goes to this create image part. So let's click on copy to editor, and now we have all of that execution data right here. So first off, for this HTTP request, you can see that the input is the prompt and the image ID. And of course, the image ID is empty, but the prompt is not, and that's exactly why we're in this flow. But to actually fill everything in for this create image part, you can again just go to the documentation and check out this create image endpoint. In this case, as you can see, it's super easy to use. So for the URL, it's this one right here, and the method is post. So we just change the method to post and put in that URL right here. Then we actually have to put in these two headers because these two H's actually mean header. So for the first header, we'll put content type as application/JSON. So in n8n, just enable send headers using fields below. And for the first header parameter, you just put in content type as name and application/JSON as value. And then for this other one, just put it as authorization and then bearer and then your API key. So once you have all that, you can just enable send body, set the body content type as JSON, then specify body as using JSON. Then for this JSON, you can just copy it from the documentation. So it's everything between these brackets right here. So you can just paste it right here. And if we take a closer look, then you'll see that we're specifying the model, the prompt, the number of images to create, and the size. So first for the model, of course, we're using GPT image 1, but you can also use DALL-E 2 or DALL-E 3. Then for the prompt, the default one will be a cute baby sea otter, but you can actually delete this and replace it with your own prompt. So just put it here. Then in my case, I just want to create one image. And then for the size, I just want a decent resolution with a square format. So that's why it says this. And once you run it like the last node, it'll output this base64 JSON format. So to convert all of that into binary image format, you can just use this node as we mentioned, and it'll output the binary file. And then you can just upload that image into Google Drive. So yes, these two nodes are pretty much the exact same thing right here. And that's exactly how you can use the new GPT image API inside n8n, and also how to use this as a tool for your agent. And okay, now that we checked out that general agent to edit and create images, let's now hop onto those three examples and see how it works with this new addition of creating images with the new API. So first off, we have this Facebook and Instagram ads analyzer agent. Like I mentioned at the start, I'm not gonna go too deep into how this works, but more into how this addition of the image creation can add more benefits to this. So if you want to know how to create this specific ads analyzer agent, then just go to my profile and check out one of my past videos. But essentially, we have an agent that can process either text message or image messages, and that it has a scrape Facebook ads tool as well as two Google document tools, and these two are just to create a report out of the whole analysis. But then we have the most wanted, the edit and create image tool. So similar to the other general agent that we just discussed, this is the exact workflow tool that we used for it. So it's exactly this one right here. And that's pretty much it. So I already explained how this tool works and how this workflow works, and everything is pretty much the same. But now of course you get a sneak peek of how this ability, how this new feature can add more value or benefit to your agents or workflows. So here, instead of just analyzing all of the ads, we'll be able to create a specific image ad creatives from all of that analysis. So now the generated images will be tailored to whatever you were looking for. Okay, so that was everything for the ads analyzer, but then we have this advanced product photography AI system. This is something I've already built in another video, but using the Google Gemini API. And while that was a free alternative, of course it wasn't as good as this current model. But essentially how this works is it first reads a Google Sheet, specifically this Google Sheet right here where you will have all of your product image URLs. So for that we're just using a simple Google Sheets node. And we're just reading the sheet, so select sheet within documents, and for operation select get rows. Then from this drop down just search for your own Google Sheet and select your sheet name. And that's pretty much it. So once you run all of this, then it'll just return all of the rows. So as you can see right here, this is the run that we did in the demo. So it just returns each row with their product image URL. And of course, at the start, the generated prompt and generated image columns aren't available. So that's why they come empty right now. But after that, to tidy everything up, we just add a set fields node, and we create a field called input image URL where we just map the actual product image URL. So this isn't 100% required, but it just makes this process neater and more organized. So now once we have all of the image URLs from the sheet, we'll now create the prompt that'll go inside the image generation API. And for this, we first have to analyze the image so that the model knows if it's an earring, if it's some sunglasses, etc. And once it knows what type of product it is, then it'll create a tailored prompt just for it. So yes, for the first node, just select the OpenAI Analyze Image node. For resource, select Image. For operation, select Analyze Image. Then for the model, you can select any you want. In my case, I selected GPT-4o Mini. And for the input, I just prompted it to super briefly describe what's in this image. And for the input type, since we have our images in URL format, then just select Image URLs. And obviously for the URLs, just map in the image URLs right here. Optionally, you can also enable Simplify Output, so now it'll look clean instead of also showing how many tokens you used, etc. But yes, as you can see, whenever you run this, it'll create a short description for all of the images. These were the 3 images, so it was a perfume bottle, some sunglasses, and some earrings. So it shows it for some sunglasses, perfume bottle, and some earrings. So now that we know what's inside all of these images, we actually create the prompt. So this is the simple message model node. In my case, I selected a GPT-4o model. Then I'm just telling it to create a short prompt for an AI image generator, and that this all will be about creating professional product photography. And then I specify that it always has to include a human model, either wearing it or holding it. Then I also tell it to include the best features like lighting, angles, realism, according to each type of product. And I also tell it that the prompt always has to include the name of the product. And as an extra, I also told it to include subtle grain for a cinematic look. So then, as mentioned here, I just sent it the description of the product, and that's pretty much it. So as you can see, the results are pretty good and create tailored prompts for each image generation. So after all of those steps, now we finally reach the step to actually create the images. So first off, since the images are in URL format, here, which is simple HTTP request with a get method, we just input the URLs from all of the images. And here you can either map it from the set image URL or from the Google Sheet node. But essentially that's the only thing you need to download the images. So just a get method and the image URL. And then once you run it, as you can see here, it downloads all of the 3 images. So if we check the first one, it's actually these sunglasses right here. So after that, once we have the downloaded images inside n8n, then we can send those images to the GPT API. I know that here you can see a loop, and this is because in my past tests, whenever I use the GPT image API, for example, in this case it was 3 images, right? So if I executed 3 image generations at a time, then it would just give out error and that the model is overloaded. So that's why I just use a loop node so that each image and process runs at a time. So first, this first image will run, and once it's finished, then the second one will start, and once the second one's finished, then the third one will start. So each one will have its own timing, and this will help the model not get overloaded. And for this, you just search the loop over items node and select batch size as 1. And then all of the processes that you want to happen in that loop, you just put it inside. So as you can see, we have these 3 nodes inside this loop. And the step to actually create the images, well, it's exactly the same one that we discussed before. So remember that workflow tool that had 2 flows. The first one was to edit images and the second one to create images from scratch. Well, this is exactly the first one to edit images. So you already know how to do this, and when you run it, it'll output the image in a base64 format. And to actually transform that to an image binary, again, you just use this convert to binary node. And exactly the same as before, you're just mapping all of the required inputs, and the file will be converted, and you can see it right here. So this is the amazing result from the earrings from the Google Sheet, which is right here. And then once you have the image, to actually upload it back to the Google Sheet, we just upload it first to Google Drive. So now we have the Google Drive link, which is this web view link. And again, all of those inputs to upload to Google Drive, you already know. But after that, once this whole loop finishes, then it just goes back here. And once everything's done, it'll just go to this done router and go to this Google Sheet node. So this one is just called append or update row. So for resource, just select sheet within documents. For operation, just select append or update row. But next, just select your Google Sheet from the dropdown. And then since we're updating each row, then n8n has to know what row we have to update. So in this case, we're going to match on the product image URL. So for example, this first image URL is for the sunglasses. So in n8n, whenever the sunglasses steps finish, then it'll just match the sunglasses URL from n8n with the sunglasses URL in the Google Sheet. And then if it matches, then it'll know that this row is the appropriate one and update everything in this row. So yes, that's just how to match everything, and it's a very important step. But after that, to actually update the rows, here it'll tell us the column. So the first column is called generated prompt. So for the generated prompt, here I'm just sending over the prompt that was created for the image generation, because sometimes the final image is absolutely amazing, and in those cases, not knowing what prompt was used to create that image would be a bummer. So yeah, that's why the generated prompt is right here. And then of course, we just update the generated image column with the final image URL, which was the one that we uploaded to the Google Drive folder. And once you run this final node, then it'll update all of the appropriate columns, and it'll look exactly like this inside the Google Sheet. So now you can check out with their respective generated prompts. And okay, so that was the automation for the Mass AI product photography. And now for the last example, we're gonna look at the news research tool. So I'm not gonna talk about all of this because I already covered that in another video. So if you want to create this from scratch, then please check that out. But essentially what this did was research a bunch of AI news from the past 24 hours from TikTok, Reddit, the internet, and a specific website called testingcatalog.com. So once it got all of those best news, then we just filtered the best ones and then created a simple HTML for a newsletter format to send it to our email. So here it was mostly for a personal use case, but I know there's a lot of people that do this research workflows to actually post to social media. So in cases like this where you actually need an image, well, the DALL-E 2 or DALL-E 3 or Midjourney images, well, you know, they weren't really good, and they were very generic and overall drove engagement down. So that's exactly where this new image generation feature comes in, and you already saw the results, so I'm not gonna go too deep into that, but they were really amazing. But the thing here is that from our original workflow, we just added this extra step to actually create the image. So here, after this node that actually filtered out the best news, and then now we're just creating a prompt for the image creation for all of those news articles. So very similar to the photography one, we're just using a simple message and model node, and in this case we're using GPT-4o. And for the prompt, I'm just telling it that it'll create another prompt for an AI image generator, and that it'll be according to a news article it needs to read. And I'm telling it the main characteristics, so that it has to be minimalistic, informative, and attention grabbing. But then after that, I'm just telling it some safety features, because for anyone that used this model, you know that sometimes it crops the text on the corners or on the sides. So this is why I'm telling it just that, and to also keep everything more in the center. And also, I don't know, but sometimes it creates that transparent blocky texture. Like the image isn't transparent, but it just creates that blocky texture behind the main image. So that's something weird, and that's why I tell it to always have a color or something in the background, but to not include that blocky texture. And finally, I just tell it that the prompt should not have double quotes, because since here we're working with JSON, then those double quotes will break everything. So instead of using those, we're just going to use hyphens, and I'm also telling it to not include any hashtags. So yes, that's the main prompt for the image generation prompt. But after that, I just send it the news article right here, and the news article will look something like this. So this model will just read everything and create a prompt according to this news article for the image generation. So once you run this step, then it'll create all of those prompts. And then again, just like last time, all of those prompts will go into the create image HTTP request. And this is the exact format that we did in the general workflow. So the part where we sent everything in the JSON format. So for the model, the prompts, the size, etc. And after that, once it runs, it'll actually create all of the images, again, in base64 format. So you can see all of that long text. And that's not what we want. So for this, we convert it to the binary format, and it'll spit out the actual image that you can see. So once you have the image, again, you just upload it back into Google Drive. And in this case, I uploaded it to this Google Drive right here, where I upload all of my images. And you can see that the designs are right here, here, and here. And yes, that was the addition for this whole workflow. So now that you know how to use this new GPT image API either inside an agent or a workflow, then now you pretty much have the foundation to go on and create your own solutions with that new image generation addition feature. Remember that this tool will just get better and better over the next couple of months or weeks. So it's always good to know what these things are capable of. And that's it. I really hope you liked this video. Remember that all of the templates that I talked about will be available in the new Skool community. So now you'd be able to plug and play all of these workflows. Remember that right now we have an early bird offer for the first couple of members, so be sure to check it out in the description. And if you're really interested in AI and automation with n8n, then be sure to check out my past videos and subscribe to not miss out on any of my future videos. Also, if you have any questions or feedback, please let me know in the comments. Thanks again for watching, thanks again for almost 2,500 subscribers, and I'll see you in the next video.